Okay. All right, you ready? You are listening to a pre-recorded broadcast and therefore a podcast of our program Sales 2020 on WNTW 92.7 FM, 820 AM, Not Your Father's Talk Station in Chester, Virginia, servicing all of Central Virginia. And if you listen to this on the internet, the world. I'm William Eastman, Managing Partner for GrowthWorks Media and your host for today's show. With me is my co-host, Donna Cundy of Cundy Leadership Solutions. And today, this is show 006, podcast 006, on the basics of the sales funnel. And to follow along, we have all our show notes up on our website, and you need to go to 2020sales.solutions. Let me say that again because it sounds kind of weird. 2020sales.solutions. There's no .com, no .net, no .organization in there.
Put the www if you really want to.
Well, yeah, the website now, the web has got so intelligent that it assumes you wrote www. But if you want to follow along, everything that we do, we put a show note up on there, and so that you can follow the presentation. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to go over to that, and I'm going to start. So how you doing, Donna?
I'm fantastic, Bill. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well.
Okay.
Pretty well. It's a interesting change here, going from live to recording. And but what we're doing here is interesting is we're acting like we're live all the time. And so what we're not doing is going, well, we'll fix that. No, we're going to do this live. And if we have a mistake, we're just going to laugh about it.
Yeah, and Facebook, if you catch us on Facebook, you'll get to see the uncut version.
And where are we on Facebook?
On my profile, actually, Donna Cundy. It's out there, just live right now on the Facebook. Hey guys.
Okay, so our show, Sales 2020. The focus here is on generating more and better revenue. So
we all need that.
The bottom line is because what we're thinking about is that if you run a business, which if you do, you should be listening to us. Mm-hmm. And if you're listening to us and you don't, you might want to reconsider that decision. Not to listen to us, I didn't mean that, but maybe you ought to start your own business. But as any business owner knows, you need more revenue. It's always the answer.
Yeah.
Well, that's
cash
only
flow,
half.
Not having cash flow kills it, doesn't it?
That's right. Yeah, because it kind of, that's one of the failure points is that you get cash starved. It's like having an infant and you give it no formula, no breast milk, it gets nothing. It doesn't live very long, and it's the same with a small business. Mm-hmm. But it's not just generating more revenue, it's generating more revenue with better margins. And that is really one of the themes that we've got here is that what does it take not only to get more sales, but to get better sales?
Interesting concept, better sales. Because I think there's a lot of business owners that are just going for cash in, not realizing that there's a margin, that you can sell something and actually lose money.
That's right. And I completely understand is when you first start the business, any sales is good, which isn't true, but in the short term, it is.
Okay.
Long term, and you start looking at it, you find out you're buying sales. And what I mean by buying sales is that you've so undercut your deals, either because your pricing's been bad or you're offering discounts to get sales in the door, that you should be writing a check to the customer because you're probably paying them to do whatever it is you're doing for them.
Yeah. It's not a good place to be.
However, if you got to pay your bills, you're not thinking that way. As long as the velocity of money coming in the door is faster than velocity of cash going out the door, you can get away with that for a while before it begins to catch up with you. Because then you just don't have the money in there. Okay, so here's what Donna and I are going to do is that up till now, we've been talking about all kind of the things you need to understand and kind of the big picture about sales and what we're trying to do with Sales 2020. Now it's time to get down to the bare bones of it because we got to stop fixing to and we got to start addressing what this is really about and it's the two things we discussed, more and better revenue. And so we're going to be working from that. Now, I can't promise to you that we're going to stick to the topic. And the reason for it is, and as an engineer, I want to start at the beginning and work my way through because there's a lot of things that have to happen before the sales process starts in order to make sales work.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have any type of branding. Oh, let's work backwards. If you don't, how do you sell if you don't market? Because how do you sell if nobody knows who you are? Mm-hmm. So marketing becomes the issue of what message do you put out?
Yeah, but how many business owners that are just starting out won't even get to that point because they're so worried about, oh, what's my LLC going to be called? Or what's my, you got to get past that too.
Well, yeah. So that means you really got to back up the branding, because if you don't have a message about your business, about what it is, and the types of connections that you need to make with customers, you need to make an emotional connection, you need to make a rational connection, you need to make a personal connection. And we'll get around to talking about those when we talk about branding. But if you don't do that, then it's really difficult to sell. But if you don't know what those messages are, then how do you market? And, But we're not going to do that today.
Not today.
Not today. Not today.
What are we going to do today, Bill?
What we're going to do is, after we do a review of the last two shows, because we're going to be hitting topics that we said we were going to cover, now we're going to cover it. But really, it's the issue of, what is the sales model you're going to use to manage the funnel? And you said it to me this morning as we were talking about today's show, is that almost any sales model, any funnel model will work if you do it. And I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. Will it work? Yes.
That's right. Because what happens is it becomes a discipline. And if you put metrics into place, the metrics force you, unless you really want to be delusional, the metrics will then force you to go, I'm not getting the numbers I need to get. What am I going to do with it or about it?
And I think that's when the funnel stops working, because there's the business owner in the mindset. I'm always talking the mindset, but if you're not measuring, if you're not bringing new people, and if you're not continuing to work the funnel's not going to work for you. So will it work? Yes. Will it not work? Yes. Depends on you, doesn't it?
That's right. So I'm going to hit briefly what we covered in show 4 and 5. So my recommendation is, on the website, you can listen to shows 4 and 5. If you want to go back, I'm not going to cover everything, but what I am going to talk about is, one, show 4 was around marketing and sales tools, because today is really drilling down pretty seriously into the details. But the tools, and we have a 6-part model that we use in order to make marketing spend, which is a term we use in marketing. It's nothing more than how much money you're spending on marketing. Are you getting anything from it? And so one is, what is your mix of media channels? Do you use social media or not use it? Do you use email, not use it? Do you send out cards? Do you put flyers on windshields? You send out emails, etc. In other words, there are probably, what did we come up with that one day? We had 128.
There was a lot.
128 different potential channels to get out there with.
Yes.
And maybe half of them will work for you, but you don't have the time and money. So the idea here is, what are the 3 or 4 that are absolutely critical you got to go to? Then number 2 is, I've got this concept of, instead of trying to sell to people, I'm looking for people to raise their hand. And so what is the message? Because the assumption is people want to buy what you sell.
Absolutely.
But if they don't know who you are or how to get a hold of you, it's rather difficult for them to choose you.
Yeah, we were just talking about that before the show, because being a coach, I know a lot of coaches that how are they getting their name out there? They sit at home waiting for the phone to ring. Well, that doesn't work, does it?
The phone doesn't ring. Only in the Field of Dreams did it work, where somebody said, build it and they will come.
Yeah.
And of course, that was fiction and not fact. So part 2 is tested messages. How do I test messages to find out which one gets the most people to raise their hand? And it's the right people, because this is, again, goes back to the issue of, I get more revenue and I get better margins because I have more of the right people going, hey, talk to me. Then based upon those messages, how do you validate that this is the one that we're going to put our energy and time behind, to say, okay, after that testing, it's this one, and this is where we're going to spend our dollars? Because in the testing, it's spending anything. You could basically spend, let's say you had 3 messages, you spend $10 on each one on Facebook. Use that as an example. $30, you should be able to figure out which of those 3 messages work, and then spend another $70. So you've committed $100. Come on. You're not going to spend $100. Why you listen to me?
Yeah, but you're doing it smartly. You're not going out there guns a-blazing with the $500 ad spend right away, not knowing where you're.
And that's and the people who have lost money and said it doesn't work. That's exactly how it's happened. Is that you, as the owner, you might have a really good handle on what you think people want to hear,
Because you're connected to it, because you love it.
But it doesn't make any sense to the people
No.
you're advertising to. And if you get any marketing expert who's going to come in and say to you, well, this is going to absolutely work, and they don't do any type of testing, run as quickly as you can in the opposite direction. So after I validated the results and said that's the message, then we put together the campaign and we put most of the spend behind that. And then you're constantly testing after that. And then finally, what you've done is you built a core audience. Now, who's the core audience? That's your qualified leads.
Mm-hmm.
What you got is the right people saying to you, okay, this is what we want to do. So that's what we talked about in show number 4. And that was one that we're going to cover today. The other one is in show 5, we talked about measuring results. And we came up with 9. Now, I'm going to go through these fast. If you want anything to know about these 9, go back and listen to the podcast for show 5. One is brand penetration. In other words, how many people know about you?
Yes.
Yeah. Number 2, congruence. What they know about you, does it fit what you've been trying to do? You think you're great. They think you suck. You got a problem. Okay. Number 3, do you have the same information about your competitors? Because if we're going to market, see, I got her going on that one. I'm on a roll. I haven't been on radio. I haven't been on radio in a week. So I'm like rolling here.
Paybacks for the last one.
But competitive intelligence, what I'm talking about here is that I want to know what people think, positive and negative, about my competitors, because if I'm going to put together a marketing campaign, okay, I need to know what I want to say. And so if you think about this, you're going to send out 3 messages. One is, how do I suppress the buyers of my competitors? How do I have them question whether or not they want to go back and buy from them? And I got to be subtle about this, because I can't say product B is horrible, that company is terrible, because number 1, that turns people off, and number 2, could get you sued. So how do I subtly say they suck? That's really what I'm looking to do. Then you've got the people who are in the buying process on the fence, and what type of information that I need to give them to have them come to my side. That is different than trying to suppress buyers of your competitors. Then number 3 is that I have some people, hopefully, who have bought from me in the past. How do I reinforce that to create, and I'll use the word, even though most people get weird about it, a cult? I mean,
a tribe. I think a tribe is more acceptable.
But what always gets me is I don't own any Apple products, and I don't own Apple products for a number of reasons. However, I'm always amazed by Apple comes out with a new device. People will stand in line in the rain to get it overnight to pay a price premium that if they waited 2 weeks, they could walk in the store and in 5 minutes have made the purchase. That is the type of loyalty that we're trying to create. There's a whole bunch of messaging out around that. Okay. All right. Now, so we've taken that. And then today we're saying, okay, I've done all that. So I have people coming into my funnel. So based upon those marketing activities, what do I need to do to get better leads into my sales funnel? Okay. Of these customers, what's their lifetime value? What are they really worth to me if I can get a repeat purchase?
Right. And isn't that important so that you know how much to spend on them?
That's right. But also it helps with your employees know that even though this may be a $100 purchase here, it's a $100 purchase how many times a year for how many
long
years?
Term.
The other thing I wanted to start doing is I want to get a handle on what is it costing me to acquire accounts, because cost of sales is one of the key metrics as a business owner I want to stay on top of. One of the ways I get better margins is I reduce the cost of sales.
To get a new client.
Because, I've been places where we buy sales. In other words, we spend so much money in marketing and advertising.
Oh, sure.
Is that we finally had that in, and then when we put our margin on it, we really couldn't. To get profitable, we found out we lost money on the account. And so I want to take a look at how many of those leads that I get into my funnel close, which is a major focus that we're going to be taking here. And then how long does it take to close those leads? And then what is the average sale price? And this is one that's really critical to me, is that most organizations do not get a handle on this until it's too late. But you have salespeople who are discounting in order to sell, and that's cutting into your margin.
Race to the bottom.
Right? So if you got 100 leads and you're closing 1, you are taking, instead of taking a month, you're taking 2 months to close that deal. And then you got salespeople discounting. How do you get bad or no margins on your sales? There you are. Now, our focus today, and again, you're listening to Sales 2020 on WNTW 92.7 FM, 820 AM out of Chester, Virginia. If you're listening to the show, it's Saturday or Sunday. It's pre-recorded. It's Thursday at 1:56 in the studio here with Donna and I, but you're not going to be hearing this today unless you're on Facebook. And again, where on Facebook can I find this?
Donna Cundy profile page. It's right out there in the public.
Okay, so now, show 6, you need to be at the webpage, and that would be 2020 sales.solutions. That's 2020 sales.solutions. Go to show notes on the navigation bar at the very top, and it's the top one, and it's show 6006. Okay, the basics of the sales funnel. All right, so let me tell you, I have some responsibility to tell you who I borrow from, and because if nothing else, these are people you need to work with. When I got into sales about 30 years ago, one of the first training I got in sales was with Miller Heiman. And there's a lot of things I like about them, but basically what I got from them is that they're a very good strategic sales company. Now, I've worked with Sandler. I think Sandler is an excellent organization. So it's kind of like what you and I were talking about before with the sales funnel. Pick one and work it, and it works.
Yeah, work it till you know it.
Right. And so there's a couple different out there that I think are good, but Miller Heiman is where I started, and I really like their model of, which is where we're going to use for the sales funnel. You got 4 stages in the process. You got a qualified lead. That means you've looked at a bunch of different companies. Let's say you buy a mail list. All right. So you bought a mail list. You got 5,000 contacts on the mail list, 5,000 businesses. So let's say you're a B2B. You're a business owner business. Not all 5,000 of those are ripe for a sale. So how do you take this list of leads and turn them into qualified leads?
I don't know, Bill. How do you trick this list?
We're going to talk about that. Okay, so that's number 1. Then number 2 is that, okay, I got the qualified leads. How do I touch them? And this gets back to where we started with the media channels. How do I touch them in a way that I get them to raise their hand? The proposition is this list of people, this list of businesses are looking for what I sell. How do I let them know I'm here? Let them know what my offer is, so that, and how do I provide them the opportunity to raise their hand and say, I have some interest in what you're doing.
Basically getting through all the noise out there,
right?
The digital noise.
And then number 3 is that once I've talked to them and engaged them, let's say that they have an interest, and now they are as interested in us as we are in them. So you don't have a one-way relationship. You actually have something that's two-way. And so that's now when they
Isn't that really where you have a relationship? Because you had no relationship before that.
Well, there's a lot of marketing companies out there who think that because you do not identify their emails as spam, you have a relationship with them.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's not a metric I would use. So we go from qualified leads to suspects, people that they raise their hand and we suspect that they're going to buy. Now, how do I move them over to the next one in the sales funnel? And those are prospects. These are people who have basically said, I'm interested in your offer. I'm going to be making a buying decision here shortly. Let's talk. And how do I get those people into the next phase? And that is closing the deal. And so the Miller Heiman model is qualified lead to suspect, suspect to prospect, prospect to close sale. And that's how I've been managing sales funnels for 30 years.
It sounds easy enough.
Now, you want to come up with a 7-step model? Be my guest.
I think, really, again, does it work? This model, it doesn't matter which model. Find a model that you're comfortable with. Find a model that fits your business. And then go try it. Mm-hmm. Try it long enough to see if it'll work too. That's
right. And so that's the one we're going to use there. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to spend a lot more time with it during the broadcast. Now, on the other side here is that I talked about the other sales model. And this one was a gentleman by the name of Neil Rackman. And I had an opportunity to meet him, and I learned his sales model in the early 90s, about 20 years ago now. It's interesting now that we're at 2020, I could say 20 years ago. Neil had a concept called SPIN, which I really like: situation, problem, involvement, needs. Now, you don't have to write that down. Here's the bottom line: Rackman's model. You identify the pain points that the customer's having. In other words, the whole theme around this show is attract the willing, solve the problem. Okay, so we've talked about attracting the willing. Now, what are we doing? We're trying to solve the problem. So the whole idea behind this process, we will go into this in detail. Trust me. When we get into, I have a prospect and I want to close them, I'm going to be using predominantly the spin methodology to do that. But I want to identify what are the pain points. I don't want to guess what they are. I want to identify what those pain points are. What are all the issues they're trying to deal with? Now, there's several reasons that you do this, but there are two that I want to focus in on. Number one is the customer many times does not understand the root cause of the issue.
No,
and you
don't.
Can't trust them to understand the root cause until they prove it to you. Because if you give them a solution that treats a symptom, see, we have all these things that happen, these symptoms, and we think that that's the problem and we treat it. What if it doesn't work? Because typically it doesn't. It's kind of like having some sort of ailment that shows up as a skin disease.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it shows up on your skin, but it has nothing to do with your skin. So you put this ointment on it and it goes away and you think it works. Well, I can tell you what, you could have rubbed dirt on your skin and those things would have went away because it is not the root cause of the problem. So one of the things I want to do in this process is I want to actively engage with the customer and I want to talk through what's going on so that I help them understand the root cause. I'm not sure I'm smart enough to tell them what it is, even after I've been doing this all those years. And even if I'm smart enough to tell them, that's probably not going to work because then whose prescription is it? It's not. It's mine. It's not theirs.
Mm-hmm.
I have to help them arrive at that. The other part of this is I want to understand how much the pain, the issue costs.
Right.
Because now what do you know?
You know what you can charge?
Absolutely. In other words, and more than likely, if you do this correctly, and I don't mean that you fudge the numbers, you work through this, the cost of your solution is way below the cost to them or to their company or to the organization for this issue.
One of my favorite qualifying questions in the coaching lane is what has not having this, not doing this cost you? And the answers come back in money, and it comes back also in time, and it comes back in emotions. There's so many ways that the cost shows up. And, you know, what I find is even when they're getting into the emotional, then you charge even more.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, but at least you know is that if you help them identify the issue and it's $100,000 problem and your solution is $25,000.
It's an easy sale.
Well, if you don't sell it, you've got to ask yourself some serious questions because you've eliminated price as the reason the customer is not buying. That's really what you want to do here.
Well, and you want to get in the customer's mind that your solution is that much of a value, because most customers won't come up and think what they've lost. They won't think about what it's costing them not to have your problem. They're just like, I have this problem, and they stop it there instead of thinking it through all the way that it's actually affecting them. In a bottom line, it's affecting them emotionally, however it's affecting them.
Yeah, and and a lot of times if it's really an emotional issue, we're not engaging our logic a lot. All we know is it's terrible, it's hurting me, I want it fixed.
And more people will buy on emotion.
Right. Well, and we
unless
all
you
know
have a flat
true.
tire or whatever, you know.
Well, even that. I mean, you figure people say, well, I made a rational buying decision. I doubt that.
Yeah.
They made an emotional buying decision, and then they used their rationality and logic to justify.
There you go.
That was a great
that makes
decision.
Sense. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, but this whole thing about prospects and where I'm going with Neil Rackman and spin, which I'd heartily recommend you take a look at with that model, is that all you're trying to do is help the customer totally understand what the root cause of the issue is, what all of the issues are, and what are the cost of those issues, so that they have a sense of what a solution is worth to them. And I can't think of 40 years of business that I ever had a solution that cost more than the pain. It was always less. It was always less. If you looked over, a period of time and you said, okay, what does it cost you over the space of a year? What do you do about that? Okay. And so, and then finally, you've got customers. You've done this, and you've gone through the objections. And when we go through this, we'll talk about objections a lot, because sometimes you want objections and sometimes you don't. It's interesting, is you don't want to eliminate all the objections. You want
I
to
can't
eliminate
wait
the
to
ones.
hear that line of thought.
Well, because there's some that you want to save to the end to make sure that they're
Okay.
committed to the deal.
Okay.
And there's stuff that objections that they throw up in there that you should be saying to yourself, how did I let that happen? That should have been handled earlier in the process.
Yeah, I like to get my some objections after the first pitch, actually.
Well, and if you're, the approach I'm using is the method of closing is small yeses.
Sure, I can see that.
They agree with this, they agree with this, agree with this, and so you build a preponderance of yeses. So if they've been said yes to everything, how can they raise an objection?
Mm-hmm.
If they do, then you got to say to yourself, perhaps I didn't ask the right question, or they lied to me,
Or a lot of times the objection is a smoke screen.
Oh yeah, I see that as well.
Yeah, if I give you my answer right away, so as long as the objection is not a no, you still have a chance. Let the no's go.
Well, but the no's, that's another interesting topic. We'll talk about the issue of yes, no, maybe when we come back from the break. And so I'm just looking at the time here. Okay, let me close this out. So the two people I'd recommend, you go take a look at Miller Hyman's model on sales funnels. You pick one out, one that fits your business. That's fine. I'm not saying that you use this fourth step. If you don't have one, I'd say start here because it's pretty simple and we're going to be using it throughout. And in terms of what tactical model you use with the customer, there are a number of different sales models. If you're into retail and it's order taking, somebody comes to the counter, obviously that's one approach. Another one is a relationship-based model where they're buying from you because they're buying from you. Mm-hmm. They're not, because they like you and they don't like the other guy or the other woman that's coming in and make the sales call. And so in relationship selling, typically the reason that they're buying is that all the products and services are the same. And it's almost impossible to differentiate between you and your other three competitors. So then I have to build a relationship of, I don't want to disappoint you by letting the competition get the sale. The
loyalty.
Third type,
it's a loyalty.
For example, selling cars.
Yeah, sure.
I did some work in automobile dealerships, and it's almost all relationship selling. Then you have consultative selling, which is really what I'm talking about here. And consultative selling is all problem solving. The customer has problems they're trying to do away with, and they're coming to you for help. And so part of the help they're going to get, the consulting, is asking them the right questions to help them solve their problems.
It's my favorite way.
We're not going to do a lot of that in this show, but we will in...
I can't wait, Bill.
Let's see, 7, 8, 9. In show 9,
okay.
We're going to be doing this.
Sign me up. I'll be there.
You've been listening to This is Sales 2020. This is William Eastman, your host for today's show with Donna Kunde. And we will be back. You're listening, by the way, to WNTW 92.7 FM, 820 AM, and we'll be back in 3. And we're back. This is WNTW 92.7 FM, 820 AM, Not Your Father's Talk Station. Live. Well, no, not live.
We're live
Recording.
right now.
I'm live right now on Thursday at 2:11 in the afternoon. But you're listening to this on Saturday and Sunday between 10 and 11. So this is Memorex. This is a recording, and this is our show. The program is called Sales 2020, and that signifies what does sales look like in the year 2020. We could play with the 2020 vision stuff, but we're not. Okay. If you want to, you can. But it's what does sales look like? It's show number 6. And 6 is where we stop fixing to, and we get down to the topic of managing the sales funnel. Now, we're going to do an overview. We're going to recover what we did in the first half of the show. And we're going to do a drill down on these and then set us up for next week. Because for next week, for example, we're going to take number 1 in this, and that's qualified leads. And we're going to drill down and tell you what to do in our show notes, which, by the way, you need to be on our website. And that is, you can put the 3 W's in front of it if you need, but I think now the browsers are all smart enough.
They certainly are.
And you go ahead.
I was just going to say sometimes the people aren't, but that's not very nice.
Yeah, okay. Oh, so you're in that mood too, huh? I would say that the place you would like to be online is 2020sales.solutions, okay? Not .com, not .net, not .org. None of that.
And of course, all of our listeners are smart enough to know that.
Oh, of course. If you're listening to us, you are smart enough. Yes. I'm William Eastman. I'm managing partner for GrowthWorks Media, and we're the people who have the intellectual property that we're talking about here. And my co-host with me from Kunde Leadership Solutions is Donna Kunde. And we've been doing this show now for 6 weeks, and we're going to be doing it for a long time. And the show's topic today is the basics of the sales funnel. So go to the website, 2020sales.solutions, go to show notes, open up number 6. And if you go to the bottom of that post, we're going to be working there. So the 4 things we're going to discuss: qualified leads, suspects, prospects, closed sales. That's the funnel the absolute most basic sales funnel that you can put together and manage.
Sounds easy enough.
So qualified leads. Donna, tell me what you've been doing around qualified leads. How do you take a bunch of people who may be interested and figure out who you ought to be talking to?
That's a great question. I know we talked a little earlier in the show about how, as a coach, where do you go and find people who are raising their hands saying, I need help? Well, one of the things that I've been doing, Bill, is I've decided to go onto a platform called Meetup. And Meetup is a fun place to be because what I'm doing is creating a group of people who want what I have, who said, I'm raising my hand, I want to come, I want to hear more about it. And so on that platform, I've got several groups, and the people will join the group, and then I'll have an event. They show up to the event. At the end of the event, there's a feedback form. This conversation always says, in order for this event to grow and be better the next time, I need your feedback. And oh, by the way, there's a line on there that says, if you would like to have a coaching consultation, check this box, give me your phone number. Too easy.
Okay, so here in the Richmond area, we're looking at one that has 898 names in there. Mm-hmm. So what you're going to do is you're going to put that proposition out there. How are you going to do that?
I'm going to create the event in Meetup, and I'm going to go on Eventbrite.com and create a ticket. So they have to have a ticket to get the seat. Whether you charge for the ticket or not is irrelevant, but Eventbrite will also market it for you. So Meetup's marketing for you. Eventbrite is marketing for you. I'm going to create a Facebook event on my business page for that so that I can get it out through that channel as well. And it's one event broadcast out 3 times. Eventbrite captures the information, gives you the data that we've been talking about on who comes. You can put down the RSVPs, then who shows up, so you know who shows up. And then you can import your list into your email list. And now you can contact the people, even if they didn't show up, if they just RSVP'd, now you can contact them. So you contact them on a regular basis, let them know when your next event is. Oh, by the way, I have something for sale. And it's just, to me, it's a gentle way of gathering people and getting them into the sale.
Okay, so let's take that and let's break that down into pieces. You get 898 names that are leads. They're potentials.
Yes.
But you have no idea of who's interested and who isn't.
That's correct.
So now the reason that you take that list and you use Eventbrite, is that correct?
In Meetup, there is, you create the event in Meetup.
Right.
You create the ticket in Eventbrite.
Okay. Now, and why would you create the ticket in Eventbrite?
Because Eventbrite is going to market the event. There's people that sign up for Eventbrite because they want to go places, and I want those people to show up.
Okay. So now you'll have a recorded of who has at least raised their hand and expressed some interest in showing up.
That's right.
And you'll have what information?
I get their email, I get their phone number, I get their name.
Okay. Now we have
and they get a ticket.
And they get a ticket. So you can charge or not charge. In this case, we're not going to.
Right.
Because we're talking about a strategy that we're about to deploy probably next week. Okay. So now they get a free ticket. You know who they are. They've raised their hand to have nominal interest. Are they a qualified lead yet? No. But at least
they've done more, because the first yes was them joining a group.
Right. And
now the second yes is I want to do something.
Right. And so the key to this is you have to get the customer to, or the prospect, to do something. If it's all passive, then you don't have somebody who's a potential suspect.
Right.
And that's where we get in a lot of trouble, because people don't, kick back. They don't, and I'll get the email in a minute, and they don't label my email spam, and they say don't want anymore. We assume that, well, if that's the case, or they opened it, that they're interested. That's not the case at all.
That could have been a mistake.
Right. Or they read it and they went, oh, this is BS. Okay, so now you got it in Eventbrite, and then what? The Eventbrite sends it out.
Eventbrite will send it out. Meetup will send it out. Again, I do Facebook, a Facebook event, and I'll send it out through the people that have said yes to my Facebook page. If I wanted to, I could spend money on an ad in Facebook for that.
But we don't want to do that yet. So now let's play this out. You're taking something that existed that gives you a list of leads. You're using Eventbrite as a methodology of capturing data
and marketing.
You're now using Facebook as another way of touching them. So they're going to get a couple touches. Okay. And then do we do anything else, or do we have the event?
Meetup does the event also.
Okay. But
that's it.
Is there any other step in here, or do we go to the event? Or
then we go to the event.
Okay.
We provide value. We collect data.
Okay. So now we got a second data opportunity, and we collect data. Now, what data do you typically collect? So if you know their name, and you know their email address, and you know their phone number, we already have that.
Yeah.
What else are you not going to collect?
On my feedback forms, what I like to collect, again, is just the name, email address, the basic questions, because those are easy. Then what did you like about this event? I'll get a rating of 1 to 10. Specifically, what did you like? What would you like to see at the next one? I want to know, do you want a consultation? I want to know, do you have a testimonial? And if you have a testimonial, can I use your testimonial? So there's a yes, no on the testimonial. And if I use your testimonial, do you have a business? And I'll get their shout out to them. So it's kind of a reciprocity sort of thing. Okay.
All right. And then the people that then have in some way provided that information, then it sounds like you go to MailChimp.
Yeah. But before that, with the testimony, the neat thing about that is then I use those testimonies for the next event. So now I have, So look what these people said about the last event. You're going to definitely want to be at the next one.
Okay. So now what you have is you have people who raise their hand, and you have suspects. You have people who have agreed now to talk to you about your offer because they have an interest in it. Okay. So let me take it from an email perspective, because I typically buy lists. That's been my background.
Okay.
And so, without getting into all the details of how to write the ad and all that, the big thing that I'm looking for here is there's two metrics that I need. Number one is how many people actually open the email. All right. So that's one check. So I've got a bunch of leads. I don't know who's qualified. So that means you write a really good subject line. People will go, that's interesting, and click it open. So I've got one indication. The second thing is I will put one link in the body of the message, and I'll probably put that link in several times. And that will take them to either a landing page, or that'll take them to my website, or it'll take them maybe to my Facebook page. But the challenge is I want to be able to capture the metrics. So I typically would not take them to my homepage, because my homepage I'm using for if I'm buying AdWords from Google, or I'm doing search engine optimization. That typically comes to the homepage. So it may be I have created a special page on my website,
landing page, yeah.
A landing page, whether it's totally separate from the website or a special page on the website, so that I can track how many people have clicked and come over to the site.
And you don't have to have that page live to the public, right? That can just be a hidden page, just so you can collect the data so people can't search for it, so you know exactly that it's coming from that.
Yes, you can set it up in that way that only people who have this special link can do that. And of course, you can put like a promo code in there so that you can determine it was this promo. And we'll get all those details.
Okay.
But it's the same thing. It's that suddenly what I've got is that I now have people raising their hand going, I have an interest in having a further conversation. So now I got my suspects. Let's move on to suspects.
Okay.
All right. I got qualified leads. I've got now people turned into suspects. Now what? What do I do with them?
Well, that's a great question. What
Okay.
should we do? We should have some sales conversation, shouldn't we? Give them an offer at some point?
Should we have a sales conversation, or should we get more in depth on
what do they need? Their pains. We got to ask questions, don't we?
Or who they are and why did they respond?
Yeah.
And maybe we want to build a relationship now.
Relationship. What a great idea.
Before we get into the sales process, because suspects haven't said sell to me.
Okay.
They said to me, I'm interested in what you're doing.
So they're still delicate.
Right. They're still delicate little flowers. Okay. We want to look at it like little flowers. Because what I don't want to do after I've just spent all this time and money and energy
is kill them,
scaring them off.
Right. Yeah. Kill the relation. That you don't have that relation. You don't want to.
Now keep this in mind, everybody out there. Okay. Because I'm going to come back to this many, many times. You don't want too many steps in the sales process. We have this 4 stages. Each one of those stages will have some steps in it. We'll talk about those. Well, you don't want to have too few, because then you burden. And I've seen so many companies blow up on this. In fact, the number one thing that I do when I come into a company that has a sales funnel, the number one thing I typically have done is build sales funnels, because they don't have anything.
Huh.
You got one salesperson doing this way, another salesperson doing it that way. There's no agreed upon funnel, and is visually posted so we can track accounts. It is the issue of, well, this should be a 2-step sale. Well, good luck with that. Is that most sales to close in 2. Now you run a retail store, maybe it's a 1-step sale. They walk in the door, they find what they want on the shelf, and they go out to the cash register. But most of us are not into that simple of a sale. We're selling something that requires some work. So if you say it's a 2-step sales process, that puts an incredible amount of burden on those 2 meetings to close a deal.
Sure.
And you chase customers off. So I've always looked at it and say, it should be 3 to 4 steps into a sale.
And yeah, well, time is money too. If you're going to make another appointment to follow up on a sale, that doesn't make any sense.
If you don't need it. On the other hand, if I try to close it in the opening and then I chase people off, and so that's why this is.
Does it matter what size the sale is? Like I would think maybe a house you'd want.
No, I think it has to do with the simplicity or complexity of what the solution is.
Oh, okay.
I mean, money would come into it. If we're having a multi-million-dollar deal, more than likely they've got a whole contracting process you're going to go through. So nobody's going to walk in and say, yeah, that's a great idea. Here's a check for $1 million. That ain't going to happen.
That'd be nice.
I worked in the automotive industry for a long time. Our contracts with those guys were between $500,000 and $750,000. And I can tell you that it took months upon months to work with contracting to get those deals. Because selling this person, who I thought was the buying person, is not the truth.
Isn't that a good point? You have to know who the decision maker is, huh?
And that's part of what we'll get into when we get into this, making the transition from suspects to prospects, is what do you need to know? But I think in the suspect page area, before we move on to prospects, is you have developed in your business, and if you haven't, you will if you listen to this show, or one of these shows that we do on this program, is that you want to develop what is the buying persona of the person. In other words, what sources do they look to get information to make a better buying decision? And what you want to do, and number one is that, and number two is, how do they go about doing it? And part of that, number 3, is that are they making the decision themselves or are they taking it up? And if they're taking it to somebody else, guess what? You got the same challenge of what's the buying persona of that person. So in a large corporation, you may have 3 people who are part of the sale. You have to understand how all of them make the sale. So for me in the suspect
so that
phase,
might be different from person to person.
Oh, it usually is, because if I'm the guy on the front line, I need a piece of equipment, I am totally different than the woman who's working in contracting who's got to manage the contract.
Yep.
I got a totally different agenda. In fact, I worked with a company earlier this year. Oh no, at this time last year, now that we're into 2020, and they lost the contract with Chrysler. They were doing snow and ice removal. This is up in Canada, up at the Bramley plant in Ontario. And the reason they lost it was the client loved them. The plant manager loved them. Contracting hated them.
Oh.
Because because they're a small company. They didn't get the paperwork in on time. The paperwork wasn't right. They got fired off the account.
Doesn't that go back to how you think you are being seen, but how are you really being seen?
And not identifying who you're really selling to.
Sure.
He didn't realize, these guys didn't realize that that their first sale was to the plant manager. The second sale was to the contracting officer who was managing the account. And they lost the account and because they couldn't handle the paperwork. Now, they could have.
What a sad thing.
Well, this was one of the challenges of this company, is that the owner was a great entrepreneur and refused to have any bureaucracy, any systems, any processes. And I said, you're never going to get any bigger than you are. And what happens? He loses a multi-million-dollar contract because he can't do the damn paperwork. Okay. But the suspect, let's close out suspect here.
Okay.
Suspect is nothing more than you're beginning to collect information about them and about how they make the buying decision, where they get their data, because when you move over to the next phase, this is information that's critical. Now, it's going to be a two-way relationship because they're probably going to ask you questions about the company. Well, what about this? They may ask questions about the company in general. Typically, what they're going to do is they're going to be asking you about your products and service lines. And so this is when your marketing brochures, that type of collateral is helpful. Most of us now using websites for that. And this is a good test of your website. If you send them the website and they still got questions, something wrong with the website.
That's good data.
All right. So now they're saying, yeah, let's sharpen our pencils. Okay. So now we've moved from suspect to prospect, because now you got somebody who hasn't said they'll buy from you, but they've said, I will entertain you selling to me.
And that's a pretty good place to be.
Oh, it's a great place to be, because they're giving you all the buying signals.
Yeah.
And you've educated them enough that they now see you as a viable choice if this is a first-time buy for them, or a viable alternative if they've been buying in the past, but now they're not going to buy from them. And
probably another show is, the buying signals.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I tell you, when we get into this, we're going to drill down on these hard. And in fact, the problem is going to be in the 51 minutes that we have on any one of these podcasts is taking one of these topics and blowing it out. That's why we do the show notes. So, and by the way, I think I should say to you, you are listening to WNTW 92.7 FM, 820 AM from Chester, Virginia, servicing all of Central Virginia. The show is 2020 Sales. Oh, I should say the program is 2020 Sales. The show is show and podcast number 6. And this is the basics of managing the sales funnel. And our focus is on how do you get more sales revenue with better margins. Okay, so we got prospects. So now we're into that spin process. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit this pretty quick, because I'm going to spend a whole show on it. You and I are going to spend a whole show on it. What I want is a progression of yeses.
Okay.
In other words, I've already got rid of the maybe. I already got rid of the no's. One of the things you do in the suspect phase is that if it's a maybe, maybes are terrible answers. You either want to no, I'm not going to do it now, or no, I'm not going to do it.
And the faster you can get to know, the better.
Well, because the longer they languish as a maybe in the suspect phase, guess what?
You're wasting
cost
time.
Of sales. The clock is ticking. You're burning sunlight. It's costing you money.
Move on.
All right. So now I've got a qualified yes if. And this is when I want to really identify what is the root cause, as you and I talked about. And I want to identify what is the cost of the pain. I want to identify who is affected in the organization. I will already know if this person's not the only buyer, only person in the decision process, because more than likely I may be doing in this phase, in the prospect phase, I may be doing 2 or 3 closes. I close this person, I'm going to the next. I will say this in the show when we do it, but quickly I will say to you, don't let them present for you if you can absolutely prevent it.
Don't let who present?
Well, let's say you're somebody and they're going, well, I got to run this by my so-and-so contracting officer.
Oh, okay.
In order to get this deal.
See. Yeah. You get in front of the buyer and decision maker. You got
only accept that as an answer if that is the only after you have fought this.
I've made
nicely.
that mistake. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, because you don't know how they're going to represent it. You don't know if they have the ability to represent it.
Don't.
You don't know if
they don't
what their
know
relationship.
You and they don't know your product.
Well, what if they have a terrible relationship with their next
level?
There's
that too, right?
Yeah. So, you got to be very careful about who's championing your offer.
Yes.
Because you could have absolutely the wrong person.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what we're doing in the process. And it's a progressive series of yeses. Okay. So we agree on this. We agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, you stated that the problem is and you and I worked through this and we came up with the root cause is this. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. And then what we did is we looked at all the impact here. So what we came up with is impact number 1 is costing you about X number of dollars a year. Is that correct? Number 2. And so what you see, what I'm doing here,
reading it back to them,
and we're getting agreement on that's what we said. That's correct.
And as you're doing it, it's really hurting them in the inside, because really that's when you hear it back, when the client hears it back, it sounds so much worse than when they say it.
Right, and also what you're conveying to them, besides them having to deal with the emotion of this has got to get fixed because we can't keep this going on, is that they're saying to themselves, they get it. When they're talking to you, Donna, they're going, Donna gets it.
Yep.
And that is going to be a huge part of the sale is, do you get it? And by giving back to them the data that you collected in a way that fits their buying persona.
And that says you understand them.
That's right. I mean, and that's how you reduce the risk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we'll talk about this multiple times in the show, but, people don't trust you till they buy from you. And so this idea, well, I get them to trust me before they buy. No, you don't. They're only going to trust you after they know, after they have bought from you.
Okay.
And so what you're doing here is you're eliminating or reducing the amount of risk that you're asking to take. And now I'm talking about somebody you haven't sold to before. If you're selling to existing customers, this is a different deal.
Okay.
And now we're not talking about that.
Nope.
So I'm taking them through this whole process of calculated yeses to get them to the final where they go, okay.
Calculated yeses.
Okay. So how do we start? And then basically, then you're over into the last one where they've made a commitment to purchase your solution, whether they're going to pay at the point of sale, whether they're going to pay over 30 days, you invoice them, or they're going to do it on credit. But now they've made that commitment to you. And what you're now doing, and the most important thing here, is an alignment of expectations. Now, as a salesperson, if you're one person shop, one woman shop, you're the person who's going to probably deliver this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So even now you need to do this, but what happens if sales is different than delivery?
What do you mean by that?
Well, I've now sold this and somebody else is going to do it.
Oh, I see. So you're just the salesperson, but you're not the.
Well, let's work, because I think it's true the other way if you're doing the whole thing, but let's take that scenario.
All right.
Then what has to happen now, once we have an agreement and they've signed the paper, very, very quickly, you need to have a separate meeting conversation on alignment of expectations, because you need to understand, unless it's really simple, they're going to buy that car and drive it off the lot. Okay. There's not much to work out there. But if you're going to provide them coaching, now let's align expectations of exactly what happens when we implement this. When we do this, what is this going to look like? How many hours a week now?
Right.
Even if you said this, I don't care if you said this 10 times in a sale. You have to get an alignment between you and the customer about what they bought. And I can guarantee every time I haven't done this, it has bit me in the backside, because they have unrealistic expectations of what's going to happen. And now I get hit on this because I didn't align them. Even if everything they believe is a bag of dog do, okay, I almost said the other thing.
Don't do that.
Even if it's totally false, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
Their unrealistic expectations of what they're going to get is my fault because I didn't have this alignment meeting.
Hmm.
And so now whether you do it in telephone, you do it in person, we'll have that conversation when we get to that part of it.
Okay.
But here's what I want to do, and that's I want to align my expectations and their expectations so they know exactly what they're getting. And so that they're not mad at me at the beginning of the relationship.
Well, you want to edify their decision also, don't you? Make it that you've made this great decision. Look at what you're getting now to solve your problem. That's part of it too. So when they walk away, they're thinking, wow, I just got this great deal that's really going to benefit me, benefit the company. So that I think that's where the edification would go in there as well.
Well, a lot of times what they think is that now the problem's gone away because you've given it to me. And I'm going to make it go away. And, especially if we're selling to business owners. You don't know
how true that is.
Well, we all work with business owners. We are business owners. And we know that they're the problem. They're the reason for the problem.
Yes. It's hard. That's a hard pill to swallow. No business owner wants to hear that. And I'm a business owner, so I have to look at myself that way too. Right?
I'm doing the same thing. So what we want to do with them is work with them nicely, gently. Okay. They're little snowflakes right now, little cupcakes. And what I want to do is I want to work with them nicely to say, okay, here are my responsibilities. Here are your responsibilities.
Yes.
And I will help you win, but you have to help me help you.
Yes.
And so that's where we'll take the customers. Now, what we're going to do in the future is show 7 next week. We're going to take what you and I did on qualified leads, talking about the networking group and with emails, and we're going to blow this one out. And what we're going to have is kind of like a little matrix up there on the blog site, our show notes, talking about how do you look at this and make some decisions about what approach is going to work the best for you. And that's what we're going to do next week for show 7. For show 8, we're going to talk about how to collect the data that you need to collect on the people who raised their hands and are now identified as suspects. How do I now understand completely their situation and who they are so that in the show 7, 8, 9, in 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about the sales process. I got them here. How do I close them? And then in show 10, it'll be about the customers and how do I make sure I align expectations between what they think they're going to get and what they're actually going to get.
So you have happy customers.
That's right. I don't
tell their friends.
Yeah, I don't need to create any deal that takes more than a month or so in terms of delivery is going to be fraught with problems. I don't need to create any more because it's just the natural order of things. Nothing goes perfectly. I don't have the expectation it goes perfectly. But what I want to do is I want to reduce all of the BS I got to deal with. And when I make my own, kind of makes my day go bad because I'm going, I shouldn't be dealing with this. And I am because I did it.
Right.
And so let's prevent all the mistakes that are naturally occurring. Let's prevent as many as we can so we keep the list very short.
Makes sense.
Stuff happens. There's bumper stickers that talk about this. Stuff happens. Let's keep the stuff that doesn't work down to the short list.
I like it.
Okay, Donna, any closing thoughts for our Facebook viewers or for the people listening to the show today?
Find a funnel that works for you. Think about it. If you don't have a funnel, you definitely need something to go by because there is a definite sequence of events from getting the qualified lead to having the happy customer to repeating the process.
Okay. And I will